The carriage shuddered as the high-speed train pulled away from the platform, a low hum filling the polished interior. Leather seats gleamed beneath soft overhead lights, and glass partitions reflected the gold of late-afternoon sun. Passengers adjusted jackets and briefcases, settling into the rhythm of a journey that would cross the continent before dawn. The air smelled faintly of citrus polish and heated metal, a manufactured comfort against the growing cold outside. Maya Lindholm angled her compact mirror, checking the sharpness of her eyeliner, the perfect tilt of her power-cut bob. She wore success like a second skin, her charcoal dress tailored within a margin of precision usually reserved for architects. Beside her, a slim tablet glowed with stock charts and agenda notes for the summit waiting in Vienna. Her fingers, manicured to a pale blush, tapped lightly against the armrest as she observed the scene unfolding at the opposite end of the carriage. A man wrestled with a collapsible stroller that refused to fold, its stubborn joints squealing each time he forced it toward the luggage rack. His broad frame filled the narrow aisle, shoulders brushing the seats as other passengers muttered impatience. He was tall, perhaps mid-30s, with a close-cropped beard and a jacket that had seen too many winters. The little girl beside him clutched a canvas satchel painted with planets and stars, her small fingers smudged with graphite. She balanced on tiptoes, whispering encouragement as if her father were fixing a broken spaceship rather than a stroller hinge. "Some people," Maya murmured, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "buy their way into compartments they can't quite manage." A banker 2 rows back chuckled, hiding his amusement behind a newspaper. Another passenger smirked before returning to his laptop. The man's jaw tightened, though he kept his eyes on the stroller, forcing it into place with a final clang that echoed like a judgment. He lifted his daughter into their seats without a word, checking the belt with a soldier's precision. His movements were careful, deliberate, as if each click of the latch might hold the whole train together. The girl pressed her nose to the window, curls fogging the glass, pointing at the retreating platform where workers in neon vests shrank to bright dots. Her voice carried, soft but insistent. "Papa, look, they're loading the cargo. Do you think my telescope made it on?" He smiled faintly, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Of course it did, Starling. They'd never dare leave behind your stars." The carriage steward appeared with practiced grace, offering champagne flutes to those who seemed deserving. Maya accepted hers without looking, the stem sliding effortlessly between her fingers. The father declined with a shake of his head, requesting only water for the girl. She accepted it as if it were a treasure, her small hand holding the plastic cup with ceremony. The train surged forward, gathering speed until the fields outside blurred into green and gold streaks. Conversations resumed in low tones. Laptops opened. Glasses clinked. Yet tension still lingered around the father and daughter, invisible threads pulled taut by the earlier exchange. The girl withdrew a battered notebook, its pages filled with sketches of rockets and lunar craters. She began shading a comet, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Her father leaned close, murmuring small corrections about tail angles and velocity arcs. Maya watched, her lips curving in something between disdain and discomfort. There was intimacy there, an unpolished tenderness she did not trust. A sudden jolt rattled the carriage. Laptops slid, glasses tipped, and one man cursed as champagne spilled across his lapel. The lights flickered once, twice, before steadying. A faint metallic tang filled the air, sharp enough to draw uneasy glances. The father's head lifted instantly, eyes narrowing as he listened beyond the noise of wheels and rail. The girl stilled, pencil hovering over paper. The steward's voice smoothed across the carriage. "Just a minor adjustment on the track. Nothing to concern yourselves with." His smile did not quite reach his eyes. Maya sipped her champagne, though her hand trembled slightly against the glass. She caught the man's gaze across the aisle then, a brief connection uninvited and unsettling. There was something in his eyes, not fear, not bravado, but calculation, as though he had already begun measuring possibilities no one else had considered. He turned back to his daughter, smoothing the cover of her notebook, whispering something only she could hear. She giggled softly, tension broken, and resumed coloring her comet. The steward passed again, noting the unease in scattered faces, the whispers that rippled in the wake of the jolt. He glanced at the man with the little girl, paused as though expecting recognition, then moved on quickly. The hum of the train deepened, a low vibration settling into the bones of every passenger. Maya tried to refocus on her charts, but the numbers swam. Her reflection in the darkening window seemed foreign, edges blurred by the rushing landscape. The echo of her earlier remark pressed against her thoughts, heavy now rather than clever. She glanced once more at the man who had absorbed her insult without reply. He sat with his shoulders squared, one arm draped protectively around his daughter, as though daring the world to intrude. The girl lifted her drawing toward him, eyes shining. "Do you think it looks real enough to fly?" He studied it carefully, his smile small but sure. Real enough that it just might. Outside, the sun dipped behind a ridge, and the train entered a tunnel. Darkness swallowed the carriage for a breath, reflections colliding with reality in the glass. When the light returned, Maya found the man watching her, not with anger, not with pride, but with a quiet recognition that unsettled her more than contempt ever could. The air between them held, fragile and unfinished, as the train thundered deeper into the night. The rhythm of the train settled into a steady pulse, steel wheels beating time against invisible rails. Outside, darkness gathered in layers, the countryside a blur of shadow and faint lights scattered across distant hills. The carriage hummed with the muted clatter of keyboards, the low murmur of conversations, the sigh of travelers resigning themselves to long hours of confinement. The father adjusted his daughter's blanket, tucking it carefully beneath her chin as she yawned and curled against the seat. He brushed a thumb across her temple, eyes lingering on the quiet rise and fall of her breath. For a moment he allowed himself stillness, but the flicker of the overhead lights returned, softer this time, and he felt his body tighten with instinct he thought he had buried. Maya pretended to focus on her tablet, though her gaze drifted often toward him. She had built a career out of assessing weaknesses, detecting hesitation, exploiting doubt, but something about the way he carried himself unsettled her. His jacket was worn, his shoes unremarkable, yet he sat with the poise of someone accustomed to control under fire. It irritated her, this quiet confidence, this refusal to be defined by the judgment of others. A businessman across the aisle raised his glass in jest, his voice louder than necessary. "To first class, where at least the drama is entertaining." His companions chuckled, their laughter sharp against the quiet carriage. Maya's lips curved into a polite smile, though she noticed the father's shoulders stiffen. He said nothing, only shifted his daughter's satchel closer to his leg as though shielding it from their amusement. The steward reappeared, offering a tray of canapes, his smile tight, professional. Maya intercepted him before he passed. "The earlier jolt," she asked, voice carrying. "You're certain it was nothing?" His eyes flickered, a half-second pause before his rehearsed reassurance. "Of course, madam. These trains are engineered for far more than that. Please, enjoy the journey." He moved quickly down the aisle, avoiding further questions. The father's gaze followed him. His fingers tapped lightly against his knee, a rhythm of calculation. Maya watched the gesture with growing unease, though she couldn't explain why it unsettled her more than the steward's false calm. The girl stirred, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Papa? Are we there yet?" "Not yet, starling. Rest. We've got a long way still." His voice softened, carrying a warmth that silenced the carriage more effectively than authority ever could. The businessman with the raised glass lowered his drink, embarrassed by a shame he couldn't name. The train curved sharply, the motion pressing passengers against their seats. Outside, the landscape vanished into dense forest, trunks flashing like bars of a cage under the sweep of the carriage lights. The father shifted, scanning the window as though he could read something hidden in the passing dark. Maya's pulse quickened, the hairs on her arms rising with a sensation she hadn't felt in years, the raw awareness that control was more fragile than she liked to admit. The girl tugged at her father's sleeve. "Tell me a story. The one about the river of stars." He hesitated, eyes drifting briefly toward Maya as if he sensed her watching. Then he nodded, leaning close so only his daughter could hear. His voice dropped to a low cadence, words threading together like a secret prayer. She smiled, eyelids growing heavy as the rhythm lulled her back toward sleep. Maya strained to catch fragments, but the story was lost beneath the hum of the train. She felt strangely excluded, a bystander to something precious. Her tablet's glow mocked her with graphs and numbers that suddenly seemed weightless. She set it aside, fingers restless against her champagne glass, mind unsettled by an ache she could not define. Another flicker. Longer this time. Lights dimmed, pulsed, then steadied with a faint buzz. Conversations faltered. Laptops froze mid-slide. A man cursed softly at a lost connection. The steward appeared once more, voice louder, straining toward confidence. "Just a temporary fluctuation. Perfectly routine." But the father's head lifted sharply, eyes narrowing. His daughter stirred at the sudden tension in his body. He pressed a hand gently against her hair, whispering calm though his gaze never left the ceiling lights. Maya leaned forward. "You don't believe him," she said before she could stop herself. His eyes found hers, steady and unreadable. "Belief doesn't matter. Preparation does." The words lingered between them, heavy and uninvited. Maya swallowed, unsettled by the certainty beneath them. She wanted to retort, to cut him down with the precision of habit, but the echo of steel against steel filled the silence first. The train shuddered, a sound deep and wrong, like a groan pulled from the bones of the machine itself. The girl sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Papa?" He squeezed her hand. "It's nothing, starling. Go back to sleep." But his jaw was tight, his gaze locked on the aisle as though already anticipating what would come. The steward hurried through the carriage, face pale now, voice lowered to a whisper with his colleague near the door. Maya caught fragments. "Power module, relay fault, engine 2. Her stomach tightened. This was no routine fluctuation. The businessman with the raised glass laughed again, but the sound was brittle. "See, I told you. Entertaining." No one joined him. The father shifted, reaching into his jacket as though checking for something hidden. Maya caught the movement, her curiosity rising against her better judgment. His daughter leaned against him, trusting, unafraid. Maya envied that trust, envied the way fear seemed to dissolve against his presence. The hum of the train deepened, vibration heavier, louder. Shadows lengthened across the polished floor as the lights flickered once more, this time failing to recover their full strength. Passengers glanced at each other, silent questions passing in nervous eyes. Maya lifted her glass again, though her hand trembled. She meant to sip, to restore control, but her gaze betrayed her. It slid back to him, to the father who sat like an anchor in the storm, quiet, unshaken, as though the dark itself bent around his will. For the first time in years, Maya Lindholm felt her own certainty falter. The summit waiting in Vienna, the deals, the charts, all seemed distant, irrelevant. She realized she was watching him not as a man to be measured, but as something else entirely, a presence she couldn't yet name. The train lurched suddenly, throwing glasses from tables, scattering notebooks across the floor. The girl cried out, clutching her father's arm. He steadied her instantly, his body absorbing the jolt. Maya's tablet slid to the ground with a crack, its screen splintering into lightless shards. The steward's voice broke through, sharp with urgency this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, Remain seated. Please fasten your belts. We are managing a technical issue. But his composure cracked on the last word, and fear leaked into the air like smoke. The father rose halfway from his seat, scanning the carriage. Maya's breath caught as his gaze passed over her, a flash of recognition sparking in the dim light. For a heartbeat, she thought he might speak. Instead, he sat back down, one arm tight around his daughter, his other hand still tapping that steady rhythm against his knee. The sound of steel strained louder, the train groaning as though it carried a secret too heavy to bear. And in the pause that followed, every passenger understood something unspoken. The journey had just shifted, and nothing ahead would be routine again. The train tore through the night, its body groaning under the strain of speed and distance. Beyond the windows stretched only blackness, pierced now and then by scattered farm lights that flickered like dying stars. Inside, the carriage seemed to shrink with every shudder, as if the walls themselves pressed inward. The air grew heavy, flavored with the metallic tang of nerves. The steward did not return this time. His absence spoke louder than any announcement could. Passengers exchanged glances, quiet ripples of unease breaking across once composed faces. Laptops remained closed, glasses untouched. The hum of conversation gave way to silence broken only by the relentless rhythm of wheels on steel. The little girl shifted restlessly, sensing what the adults tried to mask. Her small fingers clutched her father's sleeve. "Papa, is the train sick?" He bent low, voice pitched so only she could hear. "Not sick, darling. Just tired. Like us sometimes." He smoothed her curls, his touch steady though his eyes betrayed the calculation beneath. He knew the difference between tired machines and failing ones. Maya watched, caught between cynicism and something she did not want to name. She had dismissed him as ordinary, a man fumbling with strollers and second-hand jackets, but nothing in his posture now seemed ordinary. He carried silence like a shield, but she could feel the weight of command hidden within it. It unsettled her more than the flickering lights. The train swayed again, harder this time. A wine glass shattered near the front of the carriage, crimson spilling across white linen like fresh blood. A woman gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth. The businessman who had mocked earlier cursed under his breath, fumbling for composure that had already abandoned him. The father rose, not hurriedly, not with drama, but with the inevitability of someone answering a call only he could hear. His daughter clutched his hand, unwilling to let go. He crouched to her level, meeting her wide eyes. "Stay here. Don't move until I'm back." "But Papa..." He pressed a finger to her lips, soft but firm. "You're my co-pilot, remember? Hold your seat steady." She nodded reluctantly, small jaw tightening with resolve beyond her years. He placed her satchel in her lap, as if the weight of her stars might anchor her through the storm. When he straightened, Maya felt the air in the carriage shift. Passengers leaned back, unconsciously making room as he moved toward the door at the far end. The sway of the train threatened to unbalance him, but his steps were sure, each one measured like a soldier crossing uncertain ground. Maya's throat tightened. Against every instinct honed in boardrooms and battlefields of commerce, she rose. "Wait." He paused, turning slightly, his expression unreadable. "You're going forward." "Yes." "You shouldn't." Her words surprised her, a crack in the armor of control she had built over decades. His gaze lingered, steady and unflinching. "Someone has to." It was not arrogance. It was not bravado. It was the calm inevitability of duty. He turned again, hand gripping the metal latch of the carriage door. Maya sat back down, her pulse loud in her ears. Around her, the others whispered, some scoffing, some grateful, all unsettled. None followed. The corridor beyond the door was darker, lights flickering in fitful pulses. He disappeared into it, and the sound of the door's seal closing behind him echoed like a verdict. The girl glanced toward Maya then, eyes wide and searching. Maya looked away, ashamed of what the child might see reflected back. The minutes stretched, each second weighted heavier than the last. The train continued its relentless pace, but every jolt now felt sharper, every sway more dangerous. The air pressed down, thick with unspoken fear. Finally, the steward returned, his uniform disheveled, his face pale. He stopped short when he saw the empty seat where the father had been. "Where is he?" the steward demanded, though his voice cracked with something closer to desperation than authority. The girl lifted her chin. "He went to help." The steward's mouth opened, closed. He hesitated, then muttered, "He shouldn't have." "Why?" Maya asked, her voice sharper than intended. The steward glanced around, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Power conduit failure. One of the drive modules overheated. It could spread. We're trying to isolate it." Passengers shifted uneasily, whispers rising again. The businessman barked a laugh devoid of humor. "So we're hurtling through the dark at 200 kilometers an hour in a fire hazard." The steward ignored him, eyes scanning the carriage again, as though expecting the father's return to save him from further explanation. But the door remained closed. The girl's grip tightened on her satchel. Her lips moved silently, shaping words Maya couldn't hear. A prayer, perhaps, or a story, like the one her father had whispered before. Maya leaned forward. "He knows what he's doing, doesn't he?" The girl's eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. "He always does." Something inside Maya faltered then, an unfamiliar sting pressing behind her eyes. She turned away, swallowing hard, fingers tightening around the stem of her untouched glass. Another jolt threw passengers against their belts. This one lingered, the carriage swaying violently before stabilizing. A faint smell of smoke threaded through the air, acrid and undeniable. Panic cracked open at last. Shouts, demands, the brittle edge of hysteria. The steward raised his hands, shouting for calm, but his voice was drowned in the rising tide of fear. People clutched bags, searched for exits that did not exist at this speed, turned on one another with questions no one could answer. Maya remained still, her eyes fixed on the door through which the father had vanished. The smoke smell thickened, and with it came the chilling certainty that control was slipping beyond recovery. Then, through the thin seam of the door, a faint glow appeared. Not the flicker of failing bulbs, but the harsh flare of sparks, blue-white against the dark. The sound followed, a sharp crackle that rattled through the floor. Gasps silenced the carriage as every head turned toward the light. The girl's hand shot up, fingers pressed to the window of the door. Her voice, soft but fierce, carried across the carriage. "That's him. He's fixing it." No one argued. Even the skeptic with the champagne fell silent, shame bowing his head. Maya stared at the sparks, her heart pounding with something that felt uncomfortably like hope. She did not know his name, his history, his purpose. But in that moment, she believed the child. The sparks flared brighter, showering light across the corridor. Then darkness swallowed them whole, leaving only silence and the hollow echo of the train's endless flight into night. The hum of the train deepened into a guttural roar, like a beast straining against chains. Shadows flickered along the ceiling, distorted by the stuttering lights. The carriage swayed with unnerving rhythm, as though the rails themselves trembled. Passengers clutched armrests and one another, their whispered prayers colliding with muffled curses. Maya kept her eyes on the sealed door. Beyond it, silence stretched, broken only by the occasional crackle that carried through the frame. Her glass lay shattered on the floor, forgotten. The only sound she could truly hear was the quickening drum of her own pulse. The girl remained still, her satchel clutched to her chest, her small face pale but composed. She watched the door as though willing it to open. Her lips moved again, silent words tracing a rhythm only she knew. Maya leaned closer, her voice lowered. "What are you saying?" The girl blinked, surprised by the intrusion. "It's a story." "A story?" She nodded. "Papa told me if I tell it to myself when I'm scared, it keeps the dark away." Maya wanted to ask more, but the steward interrupted, his shoes clicking nervously across the aisle. His composure had collapsed, hair damp with sweat, collar undone. He spoke too fast, his voice betraying panic. "We've contained part of it, but the relay chamber's overheating faster than expected. They're trying to reroute. He stopped, catching himself, eyes darting to the frightened faces surrounding him. "Everything is under control," he lied. The businessman slammed a fist against his table. "Under control? We can smell the smoke." Others joined, voices rising, questions tangled into accusations. The steward's hands shook as he raised them, but his attempts at reassurance drowned beneath the swell of fear. The girl's voice cut through, soft but steady. "Papa's there." Her certainty silenced them for a heartbeat. Maya felt the weight of those words settle into the air. The child believed without hesitation. Maya envied that faith, yet it unsettled her. She had built her life on control, on dismissing faith as weakness. Now she wondered if weakness was something else entirely. The door shuddered then, metal vibrating beneath a heavy impact. A faint tremor passed through the floor. Gasps filled the carriage. For a moment it seemed the door itself might buckle. Then it stilled. Maya's fingers dug into the fabric of her seat. She imagined him in the corridor, alone, engulfed in smoke and sparks, hands steady on failing machines. She tried to picture his face, the quiet focus in his eyes, the calm that unnerved her earlier. It was easier to believe in him now than in the steward or the engineers unseen. Another jolt rocked the train. Overhead compartments clicked open, spilling coats and bags. A bottle rolled across the floor, clattering against a seat leg before shattering. The smell of alcohol joined the acrid tang of smoke, sharp and stinging. The steward stumbled, clutching at a headrest. "Stay seated," he cried, though his own body betrayed fear. The girl slid from her seat before Maya could stop her, pressing her palm flat against the door. Her voice trembled now but did not break. "Papa, I'm here." Maya knelt beside her, the instinct surprising her as much as the action. She placed her own hand against the metal, cool and vibrating under her touch. "He'll hear you," Maya whispered, though she could not know if it was true. The girl glanced at her, eyes wide and wet. "He always does." A low groan filled the carriage, not human but mechanical, deep as thunder beneath the earth. The train lurched again, harder, sending passengers tumbling against belts. Cries rose, sharp and panicked. The businessman shouted for the emergency brake, though every passenger knew instinctively that pulling it at such speed would mean destruction. The steward barked back, voice cracking, "Sit down! Do you want to kill us all?" His authority rang hollow, stripped of conviction. The father's daughter pressed closer to the door. "Papa," she whispered, "please." The train steadied then, not completely but enough to quiet the chaos. The hum returned, ragged but holding. Passengers looked around, bewildered by the sudden reprieve. The steward straightened, seizing the moment to shout, "See? It's stabilizing. We are managing it." But Maya knew. This wasn't the steward's doing. Somewhere beyond the door, in smoke and dark, someone had forced the machine to obey. A faint hiss followed, the sound of pressure equalizing. Then silence. The door handle shifted. Passengers froze, eyes locked on the movement. The handle pressed downward slowly, deliberately, as if testing its own strength. Then it stopped. The girl's breath caught, her hand still pressed against the metal. Maya felt her heart hammer against her ribs, each beat an echo of dread and hope. The handle rose back into place. The door remained closed. Murmurs broke across the carriage, confusion sharpening into fear again. Had he failed? Was he gone? The girl shook her head fiercely, curls bouncing. No, he's still there. He's not done yet. Maya believed her. Against reason, against habit, she believed. Another tremor rattled the floor. Sparks flashed briefly through the thin seam at the bottom of the door, bright and fleeting. Then came a sound different from the rest, not mechanical, not threatening. A firm knock. Twice. The girl smiled through her tears. That's him. Passengers exhaled at once, relief breaking through panic. Maya felt her chest loosen, though uncertainty lingered. 2 knocks. Not enough to mean safety, only enough to mean alive. The steward opened his mouth as if to speak, but thought better of it. He turned away, retreating down the aisle, his authority shrinking with each step. Maya stayed beside the girl, her hand still pressed to the door. The vibrations thrummed through her palm like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt herself tethered not to profit margins or projections, but to something raw and human. The girl leaned against her, small and exhausted but unyielding. He'll come back, she murmured. Maya nodded, though she kept her eyes fixed on the door, where silence once more held sway. The train thundered forward into darkness, carrying 200 souls who now hung their hopes on the unseen man in the corridor. And as the lights flickered again, weaker than before, Maya realized with chilling clarity that the true test had not yet begun. The corridor beyond the sealed door pulsed with muffled sounds, metal grinding, the faint hiss of steam, the sharp crackle of electricity. Each noise filtered into the carriage like fragments of an unfinished story, leaving passengers to imagine the worst. The air grew hotter, tinged with smoke that irritated throats and eyes. A restless fear thickened, heavy as humidity before a storm. The girl refused to leave her post at the door. Kneeling, she traced her small hand across the seam, as if the connection alone kept her father tethered. She whispered fragments of the story he had taught her, the one about the river of stars. Her voice trembled but never broke. Maya sat close, unable to pull away. She told herself it was to calm the child, nothing more. Yet when the girl's voice faltered, Maya found herself joining in, not knowing the words, but murmuring reassurances, scraps of comfort she had long buried under schedules and deals. The child leaned into her side without hesitation, and Maya felt a jolt of something unfamiliar, responsibility that could not be bought or measured. At the far end of the carriage, the businessman had lost all composure. He paced the aisle, muttering about lawsuits and incompetence. His collar was open, sweat staining his shirt. "We should demand evacuation," he ranted, though everyone knew escape at such speed was impossible. "We're trapped in a steel coffin." His words spread panic. Passengers raised voices, clutched belongings, argued in sharp bursts. The steward rushed to intervene, but his authority rang hollow, his assurances empty. Fear was spreading like fire, consuming reason. Maya stood, surprising herself with the force in her voice. "Sit down. Panicking won't open the doors. It won't stop the train." The businessman turned on her, eyes wild. "And what will? Believing in fairy tales told to a child?" Maya's gaze cut sharp, colder than she intended. "Believing in the only one out there doing something." The carriage stilled. The child's hand tightened on Maya's sleeve, grateful for the defense. The businessman faltered, his anger collapsing into silence. He dropped into a seat, muttering but subdued. The girl looked up at Maya with wide eyes. "You believe him too?" Maya hesitated, her instinct to deny. But the truth pressed against her chest, undeniable. "Yes," she said softly. "I do." The door shuddered then, a heavy blow from the other side. Gasps rippled through the carriage. Another strike followed, harder, rattling the frame. Sparks burst at the seams, flaring briefly before fading. The child pressed both palms flat against the door, whispering, "Come back." The handle jerked downward, halfway before stopping. For a heartbeat, silence froze every soul in the carriage. Then slowly, deliberately, the handle turned the rest of the way. The door cracked open, spilling smoke into the carriage. Shapes moved in the haze. Passengers shrank back, terrified. Then he appeared, shoulders broad, jacket streaked with soot, face shadowed but steady. His eyes scanned the carriage, locking first on his daughter. Relief softened his features, though only for a breath. She flung herself forward, arms wrapping tight around his waist. He bent to hold her, coughing against the smoke, whispering something into her curls. Then he straightened, facing the passengers who stared at him with a mix of awe and desperation. "Containment's holding for now," he said, voice rough but clear. "But the relay's unstable. If it blows, we lose power to half the drive." The steward stepped forward, pale and trembling. "What can be done?" The father's eyes narrowed. "We need to cut speed, reroute energy, but that means shutting down luxuries first." His gaze swept the carriage, resting briefly on Maya before moving on. "Lights, heat, comfort. Everything non-essential goes dark." A ripple of unease passed through the passengers. Complaints rose instantly, voices of entitlement clinging to comfort even in crisis. The businessman sneered. "We paid for this. Why should we sit in the dark like cattle?" The father's eyes hardened, a soldier's gaze piercing through pretense. "Because staying alive isn't a luxury. It's survival." The words cut through protest. Silence followed, heavy and unavoidable. Maya spoke before doubt could take root again. "Do it. Shut it all down." Her voice carried authority, not the false calm of the steward, but the sharp command of someone who knew how to silence a room. Passengers wavered, then nodded reluctantly, their fear outweighing their pride. The father gave a short nod, then turned back toward the corridor. His daughter clung to him, refusing to release her grip. "Papa, don't go again." He crouched, meeting her eyes. "Starling, I have to, but I'll knock twice when it's safe. Remember?" She nodded through tears. He kissed her forehead, then gently placed her back into her seat. Maya caught the flicker in his eyes before he turned away, a silent request she couldn't ignore. Protect her. The door closed behind him once more, sealing the smoke outside. The hum of the train shifted, lower now, rougher, as if struggling to breathe. Lights dimmed gradually, plunging the carriage into shadow. Screens flickered out. Heat vents stilled. The only illumination came from the faint glow of emergency strips along the floor. Passengers shifted uneasily, stripped of their distractions. Without champagne, without tablets, without light, only fear remained. Conversations died, replaced by silence thick enough to hear every breath, every tremor of the rails. The girl slid closer to Maya, resting her head against her arm. Maya froze, uncertain. Then slowly, she let the child remain. Her warmth pressed into Maya's side, fragile but grounding. "You're not afraid?" Maya asked softly. The girl's eyes closed, her voice a whisper. "I'm afraid. But Papa says courage is doing what you have to, even when you're scared." The words struck harder than Maya expected. She stared into the darkness, thinking of boardrooms where she had mistaken bravado for strength, of victories that now seemed hollow. Courage had never looked like this, a child holding faith in smoke and shadow. The train jolted again, shaking the carriage. A burst of sparks lit the corridor seam, illuminating faces pale with dread. The hum of the engine faltered, dipped, then caught again like a heartbeat skipping a beat. The girl stirred, eyes wide. "That wasn't good." Maya pulled her closer, her own heart pounding. "No, it wasn't." The steward stumbled down the aisle, voice hoarse. He said he'll reroute to the backup system. If it works, we make it through. If not..." His words trailed off into silence, unfinished. Passengers sat rigid, every ear straining for sound beyond the door. The faint clang of tools, the crackle of failing wires, the echo of boots against steel, all reminders that their lives hung on one man's shoulders. Then, suddenly, silence. Complete, terrifying silence. The hum of the train vanished. The lights died. The world became dark. Gasps filled the carriage. Someone screamed. The child clutched Maya's arm, trembling. Maya's breath caught. In the suffocating blackness, she waited. And then, 2 knocks. Firm. Certain. The carriage exhaled as one, relief spilling into the dark. But the silence that followed left the air charged, suspended, as though the knocks had promised survival without guaranteeing safety. Darkness swallowed the carriage whole. Not the dim shadow of flickering lights, but absolute absence, an inky black that erased faces, erased distance, erased certainty. The only sounds were ragged breaths and the hammering wheels beneath their feet, each rotation a reminder that speed had not yet surrendered. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. Her hand tightened around the child's, small fingers cold but steady. Somewhere in the dark, someone whispered a prayer. Another sobbed, trying to muffle the sound. The businessman cursed. His bravado shriveled into panic. 2 knocks still echoed in Maya's mind. Alive. Working. But for how long? The girl's voice rose softly, fragile yet clear. "Papa's still there. He promised." Her certainty held the carriage in fragile balance, her small voice stronger than the steward's hollow commands. Maya held her closer, surprised by the protectiveness coursing through her own chest. She had never been anyone's shield, never allowed herself to carry another's fear. Yet now, with this child pressed into her side, she found herself whispering assurances she barely believed. Minutes crawled. The emergency glow strips faintly returned, casting a weak green sheen along the floor. Shadows bent across faces, stretching their features into masks of doubt and fatigue. The train still moved, but slower now, its hum uneven. The rhythm faltered, regained, faltered again. The steward reappeared, his outline ghost-like in the pale light. "Systems are rerouting," he said, though the quaver in his voice betrayed the truth. They were balanced on a thread. "If it holds, we'll maintain speed until the next junction." "And if it doesn't?" Maya asked. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. "Then, we stop. Wherever we are." A murmur of alarm spread. In the middle of the forest, in the middle of night, trapped in steel with no power, that possibility settled like ice over the passengers. The girl's hand squeezed Maya's tighter. "He won't let that happen," she said, her small voice carrying the certainty of faith. The businessman snapped. "She's a child, not a prophet. Stop letting her lull you into false hope." Maya rose, her figure cutting through the dimness. "Hope is all that's holding this carriage together. If you can't manage it, then sit quietly and let the rest of us breathe." The words struck harder than she intended. The businessman shrank back, muttering under his breath, but silent. Passengers stared at Maya differently now, not with admiration, not yet, but with the startled recognition that she had drawn a line no one else dared. The girl's eyes glowed in the dim light. "You sound like him." Maya blinked, thrown. "Like who?" "Papa. When he tells people what to do. They listen. You made them listen." The comparison unsettled her more than it pleased. She was used to commanding boardrooms with numbers and leverage, not strangers in the dark with fear thick in the air. Yet the child's words lingered, heavy and unshakable. Another jolt rocked the train, stronger than before. Luggage tumbled from racks, striking the floor with dull thuds. A woman cried out as a briefcase grazed her shoulder. The steward stumbled, catching himself on a seatback, his composure unraveling further. From beyond the door came a sound, metal tearing, sharp and shrill. Sparks flared through the seam, scattering bright showers across the corridor floor. The smell of burning insulation seeped in, choking, acrid. Passengers panicked again, voices rising in overlapping chaos. Maya tried to stand against it, but the tide of fear surged too quickly. The girl clutched her satchel, whispering her story again, but this time even her words shook. Maya bent low, close enough to feel the heat of the child's breath. "Tell it louder," she urged. The girl blinked through tears. "What?" "Your story. Say it louder. Make them hear." The child hesitated, then lifted her voice, trembling at first but growing steady. She spoke of the river of stars, of ships that sailed across it, of a small craft with a brave heart that carried light even when darkness tried to swallow it whole. Her words rang strange in the modern carriage, but they cut through the panic, pulling attention like a lighthouse in storm. Passengers stilled, listening despite themselves. Even the businessman bowed his head, shame flickering across his face. The story wove through the dimness, fragile but unbroken. Maya's throat tightened. She had spent her life building empires of logic, dismissing fantasy as weakness. Yet here, in a failing train, it was a child's story that steadied grown men and women. It humbled her. The sound from beyond the door grew louder, a deep grinding, followed by a sudden release of pressure. A hiss filled the air. Then came silence again. The child stopped mid-sentence, staring at the door. Every passenger leaned forward, breath suspended. Then, 3 knocks. Not 2. 3. Confusion rippled. The steward frowned, uncertain. That wasn't the signal. The girl's eyes widened, fear trembling across her face. "Something's wrong." The hum of the train faltered again, dipped, and then steadied, weaker than before. Sparks no longer flared at the seams, but the acrid smell thickened, bitter and suffocating. Maya rose, heart pounding. She pressed her palm to the door. The metal vibrated beneath her skin, hotter than before. She glanced at the girl, at the fear beginning to fracture her certainty. "Stay with me," Maya whispered, forcing calm she didn't feel. The door rattled once, violently, as though struck by something heavy. Passengers cried out. The steward stumbled backward. Maya didn't move. She held her hand against the door, waiting, praying for the sound of another knock. But the corridor remained silent. The train thundered forward into night, and for the first time, even Maya's fragile hope began to fracture. The train hurtled through the forest, its rhythm uneven, like a heart laboring under strain. The windows reflected nothing but darkness, glass trembling with every shudder of the steel beast. Inside the carriage, the air was thick with heat and fear, the smell of smoke growing sharper, coating tongues and throats with bitterness. Passengers sat rigid, listening. No one spoke above a whisper now. Every ear strained toward the sealed door, waiting for sound, for proof of life. 3 knocks had unsettled them. They had been promised 2. 3 meant something else, something no one dared define. The girl clutched her satchel tight, her small hands trembling. Her story had faltered, her faith cracked. She looked up at Maya with wide eyes that for the first time held the shadow of doubt. "Why hasn't he come back?" Maya swallowed the dryness in her throat. "He will." The words felt heavy, unsteady, but she forced them out. "He promised you, didn't he?" The child nodded, but her lips quivered. "Papa never breaks promises." Maya smoothed her curls, surprised at her own tenderness. She had built her life on mistrust, on keeping distance, but in this moment she could not push the child away. She needed her as much as the girl needed her. The steward stumbled forward, his composure gone entirely. Sweat slicked his brow, his tie hung loose, his hands shook as he clutched the back of a seat. "If the relay fails completely—" He stopped, catching himself under the weight of dozens of eyes. But silence begged for honesty. "We'll lose braking control." Gasps broke like glass. A woman sobbed openly, clutching her partner's hand. The businessman cursed again, but his voice held no fight, only despair. Maya's mind raced. Lose braking control. The thought was unbearable. She turned back to the child, desperate to anchor herself in her certainty. But the girl's eyes were fixed on the door, glistening with tears that had not yet fallen. Then, at last, a sound. A scrape, faint but distinct. The handle shifted, slow, unsteady. The door opened a fraction, spilling acrid smoke into the carriage. Passengers held their breath. Through the haze he appeared. His jacket was torn, streaked with soot. His face glistened with sweat, pale beneath the dirt. His eyes, though heavy, still carried that steady calm that commanded silence. He staggered, catching himself against the frame, then lifted his head toward the steward. "Containment won't hold. Backup's failing. We've got maybe 20 minutes before full shutdown." The words fell like stone. The steward's face drained of color. "Then what do we—" The father cut him off. "There's a manual override. In the control car. If I can get there, I can bleed off speed before we lose brakes entirely." Maya stepped forward before she realized she was moving. "You mean go through the whole train? In this?" His gaze flicked to her, steady. "It's the only way." The child let out a cry, breaking into sobs at last. "No! You can't leave again!" He crouched, gathering her in his arms, soot smearing her curls. He whispered words too low for anyone else to hear. She clung to him desperately, small hands gripping his neck. When he pulled back, his eyes lingered on hers with a depth that made even strangers ache to look away. "You're my co-pilot," he told her. "You hold steady here. I'll steer us home." She shook her head through tears, but he pressed a kiss to her forehead, then gently set her back down. Her satchel slipped to the floor, papers spilling out. Stars and comets sketched in shaky graphite. Maya stooped instinctively, gathering them, her fingers trembling as she slid them back into the bag. He straightened, facing the carriage. "Stay calm. Keep the aisles clear." Passengers nodded numbly, their earlier judgments dissolved into dependence. They were no longer skeptics, no longer critics. They were survivors clinging to him like the last thread of light. Maya caught his eye as he passed her. Something passed between them. Recognition, unfinished and wordless. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to apologize, to ask him not to go. But no words came. He moved on, shoulders squared, vanishing into the smoke-filled corridor. The door closed behind him again, and silence rushed in like a tide. The child collapsed against Maya, her sobs muffled against her side. Maya held her, rocking gently, though the gesture felt foreign. "He'll come back," she whispered, though the weight in her voice betrayed doubt. Minutes crawled. The hum of the train grew rougher, its rhythm unstable. Each lurch felt sharper, each sway more violent. Passengers sat frozen, every glance fixed on the door, as if staring could will it to open again. The steward hovered at the front, whispering into a radio that spat only static. His hands shook so badly he dropped it, the crack loud in the tense silence. Maya forced herself to stay still for the girl, but her mind churned. 20 minutes. Control car. Manual override. She imagined him forcing through smoke and failing systems, fighting against time itself. Her chest tightened at the thought of one man carrying the weight of 200 lives. Then, a sound. Distant, faint, but real. A clang, echoing from beyond the carriage. Another, closer. The rhythm of boots striking steel. The girl lifted her head, tears streaking her face. "That's him!" The sound grew louder, steady. Passengers held their breath. Relief flickered, fragile but alive. Then, silence again. It stretched too long. The girl's hand found Maya's, squeezing tight. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Why did he stop?" Maya had no answer. Her heart pounded, her mouth dry. She stared at the sealed door, willing it to open, terrified it never would. The train lurched violently, throwing passengers sideways. Glass shattered. A scream pierced the carriage. The hum of the engine faltered, dipped, caught again. And from the distance, echoing faint through steel and smoke, one single knock. Not two, not three. One. The sound froze every breath, suspended in terror and wonder, as the train thundered into the unknown. The single knock lingered in the air, reverberating through the steel like a heartbeat gone astray. Passengers sat frozen, the weight of it pressing into their chests. One knock meant nothing. Or everything. It was not the signal promised. It was not safety. It was a message none of them could decipher. The train jolted again, sharper this time, throwing cups and coats across the aisle. Sparks flared from overhead lights before they died completely, leaving only the dim glow of emergency strips. The sound of the engine roared unevenly, stuttering like a breath on the edge of collapse. The girl clutched Maya's hand with bruising force, her voice trembling. "He's still out there." Maya bent close, her lips at the child's ear. "Yes, he's fighting for us." She wanted to believe it as much as she wanted the girl to. The weight of that belief pressed harder than any boardroom negotiation she had ever endured. The steward stumbled forward, pale and shaking. "He said 20 minutes. We're almost out of time." His voice cracked, and with it, composure in the carriage splintered again. Whispers rose, panic thickening. Someone demanded answers. Another begged for brakes to be pulled. The businessman sat silent now, head in his hands, his arrogance finally stripped bare. Maya stood. She had not planned to, but her voice cut through the noise before she could stop herself. "He's not done. Sit still. Stay quiet. Don't waste the chance he's buying for you." Her words struck hard. The carriage hushed. The steward stared at her, surprised by the force of her command. Passengers leaned back into their seats, not calmed, but contained. Maya felt the girl's small hand squeeze tighter, her eyes shining through fear. "You sound just like him," she whispered again. The train thundered into a tunnel, darkness deepening, sound amplifying until the walls shook with metallic fury. Somewhere beyond, the father moved through smoke, hands on scorched metal, eyes fixed on failing gauges. He had faced worse, perhaps, but never with so much weight tethered to his choice. Each second stretched into eternity, each breath a calculation between survival and failure. Inside the carriage, silence held fragile. The girl began her story again, her small voice threading through the dark. The river of stars, the brave ship, the light that carried others across the void. This time, Maya joined her, not just murmuring, but speaking the words aloud, letting them steady her as much as the child. Passengers listened. Their fear eased not by truth, but by the rhythm of hope. Then the train lurched violently, harder than before. Luggage spilled, screams broke, the steward slammed against the wall. The hum of the engine faltered, dropped, and for a heartbeat, silence swallowed everything. The world seemed to stop. Then came a new sound, distant, hollow, but strong. A clanging rhythm, repeated, deliberate. The strike of metal against metal, echoing forward through the cars. The girl leapt to her feet, tears streaming, laughter breaking through them. "That's him! He's in the control car!" Passengers craned their necks, listening. The rhythm continued, steady, insistent, like a heartbeat restored. Hope surged, fragile but undeniable. The steward stumbled to the intercom, fumbling with switches. Static hissed, then a voice broke through, faint, rough, but unmistakable. "Override engaged. Speed bleeding off. Hold tight." The carriage erupted, a chorus of gasps and sobs, disbelief breaking into relief. Strangers clutched one another. Tears fell freely. The businessman wept openly, his arrogance dissolved into gratitude. Maya closed her eyes, the sound of his voice unraveling something tight in her chest. She had doubted, judged, dismissed, but now she understood. Strength had never worn the clothes she expected. It was soot-streaked, quiet, relentless. The train began to slow. The shift was subtle at first, a gentler rhythm beneath the wheels, then stronger, the hum lowering, the sway easing. Trees outside the windows slowed from blurs into shapes, shadows into trunks. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass, watching the world return to focus. The girl collapsed against Maya, exhausted but smiling. "He did it. He always does." Maya smoothed her hair, her own throat too tight for words. Minutes stretched until the train at last groaned into stillness, brakes squealing against rails. The sudden silence was louder than the roar had been. Passengers sat stunned, as if afraid to move. Then relief broke, cheers, applause, sobs of gratitude filling the dim carriage. The steward stumbled forward, eyes wide with disbelief. He pulled open the door. Smoke spilled in, acrid but thinning. And there he was. The father emerged, jacket scorched, hair damp with sweat, face streaked with grime. His shoulders slumped, his body trembling from effort, but his eyes still held that calm, steady light. He crossed the carriage slowly, each step carrying the weight of 200 lives. The girl bolted from her seat, flinging herself into his arms. He caught her, lifting her despite exhaustion, burying his face in her curls. For a moment the carriage was silent again, not from fear, but reverence. Maya rose, unable to stay seated. Their eyes met across the carriage. He said nothing. Neither did she. But in that gaze, something passed. Recognition, apology, respect earned where once there had been only judgment. Passengers stood, applauding, some reaching out to touch his arm as he passed, not as a hero from stories, but as the man who had carried them through fire and shadow. He accepted none of it, only shifted his daughter against his shoulder and walked on. At the far end, the door opened to night air. Forest stretched beyond, silent under a sky thick with stars. The passengers followed slowly, blinking into the cool darkness, their relief rising like prayer. Maya lingered. She watched him step down onto the gravel, his daughter still in his arms. The night wrapped around them, the silence broken only by the chirr of crickets. He tilted his face upward, eyes tracing the constellations. The girl whispered something to him, her small finger pointing at the brightest star above. He nodded, listening as if her words were command. Maya's throat tightened. She realized she would never look at the night sky the same way again. And as she stepped down from the carriage, her heels sinking into the gravel, she knew something had shifted forever. The train lay silent behind them, scarred but whole. The passengers gathered in uneven clusters, still shaken but alive. And in the middle of it all, a single father held his daughter close, the quiet strength that had carried them all now hidden once more, as if he had only done what anyone would have. But Maya knew better. She stood in the cool air, watching him disappear into the dark with his child, her heart pounding with a truth she could not yet name. The night was still unfinished, the story not yet done.